Hello and welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast, where we invite you to spend a few minutes with the staff at Cook Library. I'm Nate Goss, and I'm here today with our digital services librarian and comics fan, Lindsay, for our second installment of a segment that we're going to call Quick Draw, where we give you a little taste of a comic that we think you should try out. So welcome back to the podcast, Lindsay.
Thanks for having me.
And I think you've got, it's actually not so much a comic book, but an author that I think we're talking about today, right?
Yes, author and artist Kate Beaton.
How did you find out about Miss Beaton?
Oh, goodness. The internet.
Yeah.
Years and years ago on the internet. I'm sure a friend or several friends shared a comic or two of hers. It was a way of kind of communicating with friends, a shorthand of like, here's this comic I think you will find funny, and is also commentary on this.
Yeah, whatever this may be.
Right.
So did she got her start then in on the web?
Right.
Okay.
I think she started sharing in the late 2000s, just drawing quick comics on Facebook and sharing them with friends and family, and they encouraged her to share those with a wider audience. So she started a website called harkavagrant.com, where she still shares them, all of her comics, whatever ideas she comes up with.
And how would you describe what Kate Beaton does, or what makes her unique, I guess, in the comic universe?
Oh, what makes her unique? It's a lot of history comics, and a lot of her comics are in that kind of standard 3-panel comics that you're used to reading in like the newspaper comic sections.
Like when I used to love like the Garfield books when I was in grade school.
These, no offense to creative Garfield, but these are much funnier than Garfield. But there's a lot of historical comics and literature comics. She really enjoys the Bronte sisters and does quite a few riffs off their work.
So she sometimes is dabbling in history, sometimes if you're talking about Bronte sisters, sometimes in literature. So you would think, those for a lot of people could be kind of dry topics. So what is she doing with these generally sometimes considered dry topics to kind of bring them to life and maybe inject some humor into something that might be kind of dry for people?
She kind of boils down historical characters or characters in literature to their most kind of ridiculous. She has a couple comics where she talks about Joan of Arc, but reminds people that Joan of Arc was a teenager. And so she has a whole series of like reminding you of like, okay, so she was a teenager. So she's actually going to think, no, that was a really sick battle we just fought. A lot of her comics are very, especially her historical comics, are very anachronistic. And I read a couple interviews where she said she's even received feedback from people who are like, oh, no, Napoleon Bonaparte would not eat these types of cookies that you are writing about in your comic. So it's the anachronisms and the kind of, I don't know, pinpointing, like I said, the ridiculousness of these characters at their most ridiculous.
Yeah. So we know that she got her start in webcomics, but we're talking about stuff that we can check out at the library. So when it comes to Kate Beaton, what's available to people to check out her comic work at the library?
If they want to check out her comic work at the library, there are 2 collections. The first one is named after the website. It's Hark a Vagrant and came out in 2011. And then there's a follow-up that is called Step Aside Pops. That is from 2015. And they are both collections of stuff that have been published before on her website. She also has a couple of children's books that are very amusing that people can check out if they are interested. But they're not in the comic book format.
Those are more just like a picture book.
Right.
Would a parent read those to their child?
Yes.
Or is it for
they definitely would. I'm sure parents would find them very amusing. But yes, parents can read them to their children.
So do you have like maybe a favorite series within those books that you want to talk about?
Oh, I have a lot of favorite series.
Or maybe an example. And I should note that we're going to link in our show notes to her website, or at least some pieces of her website, so people who are listening to the podcast can get a taste of her webcomics. But, I mean, if you have anything that you'd want to maybe share as like a highlight of yours that makes you always, think fondly of Kate Beaton.
She has a series, and I believe there are collections of these in both books that are just 3-panel comics based on old Nancy Drew covers.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of those old Nancy Drew covers, if you didn't know what the story was about, you would think this is kind of crazy. So instead of writing a short comic based on what the actual book is about, it is a comic based on what you might think the book is about based on the cover. I mean, these are comics, so the medium is visual, so it is kind of hard to share.
Well, we have the book here, and I have
yes.
to agree, so much of the humor comes from the drawings themselves.
Yes. Like this one right here. The cover of the Nancy Drew book has Nancy and her friends, George and Bess, hiding, and off in the distance, in some sort of mystical light, is somebody playing the piano. And the title of the book is The Ghost of Blackwood Hall. And instead of, a synopsis of the book, it's Nancy going, I think the ghost is trying to tell us something through his music. And then the person playing the piano is singing Benny and the Jets. And Nancy going, but what could it mean? And that's not particularly funny via audio, but the looks on everybody's faces,
yeah.
You have to know, like...
I think it's the juxtaposition, too, of like the comic drawing, and then you actually do see the Nancy Drew cover.
Yes.
And the Nancy Drew cover looks so ominous and so
like,
spooky.
And then you just imagine Elton John hiding in a corner, just singing Benny and the Jets.
So there's a lot going on there, because part of it's you're reading the comic, and then the other part of it is that you're actually looking at the cover and kind of reinterpreting the cover with the comic in mind. You know, it's I think it's so clever in that way.
Yes. Oh, all of her stuff is very clever. Witty, I think, is the best word to describe pretty much all of her work.
Mm-hmm. You talked about how she has children's books, but these two books, the Hark a Vagrant and Step Aside Pops, what age group do you think she's really kind of appealing to there or writing for?
I would say, I hate to use millennials, especially older millennials. A lot of the references, I think, are to things that people in their mid to late 20s and early 30s would recognize immediately as a cultural touch point. Obviously, Benny and the Jets has a wider...
Sure, yeah.
Is a wider touch point, but there's a lot of stuff in there that it just makes me think of my childhood. And I think Kate Beaton is about maybe in her early 30s, so it would make sense for her to appeal to that age group.
And also with a lot of the Victorian stuff, and she's got that whole series on The Great Gatsby.
Yes.
That she's hitting those books and that history that we might have learned and kind of forgotten a little bit about in high school, so you can reinterpret it with fresh eyes after reading Kate Beaton.
Yes. Her series on The Great Gatsby has kind of made me want to go back and read The Great Gatsby, but it would kind of have a Kate Beaton tinge to it the entire time.
Yeah. Do you know what she's up to now at all? I know she's on Twitter. I do follow her on Twitter.
Yes.
And she's great to follow on there, but I don't know if you know what she's actually doing now.
I don't know what she is working on right now. She is still touring for, I think, King Baby, which was her most recent children's book. And I've seen her do a lot of stuff in schools, where she goes to talk about her other children's book, The Princess and the Pony. And I think she's doing some stuff with children and creating art. It looks pretty cool.
One last question I was going to ask is, I like to kind of throw this out whenever we talk about comics here, but do you think this is a good comic for people who haven't even given comics a try? Is it something that would be good for newbies, or do you think it's more for people who are more into comics regularly?
No. This is an excellent entrance point into comics. I think I've talked before about how a lot of comic book series you need to have read 200 other comics in that series to kind of understand what's going on. These are, you could pick up a book off the shelf, flip to a page, and read 3 panels, and it would be funny right then and there. And you wouldn't need all of this pre-existing knowledge to enjoy it. It's very different from some of the other graphic novels that we have on our shelves.
All right, so That's our quick draw. Kate Beaton and her collections, again, are Hark a Vagrant and Step Aside Pops at the library. And in our show notes, we will have links to her web series where she continues to draw really funny comics. Thank you, Lindsay, for being on the podcast again.
Thanks for having me.
If you want to check out any of Kate Beaton's books, you can do that easily by visiting our website, www.cooklib.org, and search our catalog. You'll find all of it there. While you're on our website, don't forget to also visit Shelf Life, the library's blog. The blog's address is shelflife.cooklib.org. And if you ever want to let us know what you think of any of our episodes, or if you have any book recommendations yourself that you'd like to send our way, you can always email us. The email is webmaster@cooklib.org. And of course, if you do enjoy this podcast, if you enjoy listening to it, help us out by spreading the word. Let your friends know, let your family know, and possibly even leave us a good, kind rating on iTunes. We'd always appreciate that. We will be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.